18 years have passed since the release of the first Fire Emblem game. Now, for the first time ever, the saga's coming to Nintendo DS with a remake of this classic title. Experience the legendary journey of Prince Marth on his way to reclaiming his kingdom in Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon. But how well do you actually know Fire Emblem? To celebrate the release of the latest installment in the series, we would like to give newcomers, as well as experienced players, a short history of the franchise. Fire Emblem is one of the best-known tactical role-playing series, with 11 full releases in Japan as of September 2008. Let's begin by taking a look at the first Fire Emblem game, the basis for Shadow Dragon. Like most Fire Emblem games, the first title was only released in Japan. It came out in 1990 for the NES and brought turn-based strategy to home consoles. Furthermore, it established the genre of tactical role-playing by mixing RPG elements with a grid-based overview map. But it was ultimately the deep characters and emotional story of young Prince Marth and his friends that captured many players' hearts. 2 years later, the sequel Fire Emblem Gaiden was released exclusively for the NES. The title introduced a completely new set of characters and numerous new gameplay features, like branching promotion trees for characters who gain experience, a navigable world map, and towns that could be explored freely. In 1994, the Fire Emblem series saw its first appearance on the SNES. The first half of the game was a remake of the original Fire Emblem title, whereas the second half was a continuation of the storyline based around the main character Marth. Besides making use of the SNES's improved graphical abilities, it introduced the option to dismount characters from horses, and while it carried over many features from previous releases, it also dropped some that were prominent in Fire Emblem Gaiden. The fourth installment in the series was set on a different continent and told another epic story that spanned across 2 generations of characters. A romance system which allowed characters to fall in love and have children was introduced, as well as player-owned castles that the player needed to defend, much larger maps, new units, and the concept of the weapons triangle, which determines the outcome of battles between different weapon types. The last Fire Emblem game for the SNES expanded on the story of the previous title and allowed players to explore this world in more depth. From a gameplay perspective, Thracia 776 was the first one to feature night combat, also known as fog of war, that required units to use torches at night. In addition, the player could rescue injured characters, capture enemies, and seize equipment. In 2002, Fire Emblem made the jump from home consoles to handhelds, with a release on Game Boy Advance. The main character, Roy, was included along with the ever-popular Marth in the fighting game Super Smash Bros. Melee for GameCube to promote the release of the Game Boy Advance game. The popularity of these characters in North America prompted Nintendo to release all future Fire Emblem titles worldwide. The first localized Fire Emblem game to be officially released outside of Japan came to Europe in 2004 as a prequel to Fire Emblem Fuuin no Tsurugi. For the first time, a prologue served as a tutorial, which was especially helpful for beginners. Players could also experience the story from the perspective of different main characters. A multiplayer mode in which up to 4 players could link up and battle it out with teams of characters from the single-player save file was also added. Fire Emblem: The Sacred Stones is the 8th game in the series and was released in Europe in 2005. Besides the introduction of new characters, the game featured a new storyline set on the continent of Magvel that could be influenced by the player. 2005 saw the first appearance of Fire Emblem on the Nintendo GameCube with Fire Emblem: Path of Radiance. It was the 3rd title released outside of Japan, and the first one to feature 3-dimensional graphics and cinematic sequences in the long release list of Fire Emblem games. The player takes the role of the young mercenary Ike, who soon finds himself in the middle of a war between the Kingdom of Crimea, the Laguz changelings, humanoids capable of transforming into animals, and the hostile Kingdom of Dane that killed his father. The sequel to Path of Radiance is called Radiant Dawn, and its story takes place 3 years after that of its predecessor. Data can be transferred between the games via the GameCube memory card, and the introduction of strategic advantage for units located in an elevated position adds even more tactical depth to the battles. Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon gives you the chance to re-experience the game that started the series in an all-new way. Newcomers to the franchise are now given the opportunity to get involved in Fire Emblem for the first time in this revival of a classic, and veterans will enjoy the additions that have been made to the game. These include the ability to move units easily on the battlefield with your stylus and the DS touchscreen, whilst keeping vital information about your characters constantly displayed on the top screen, as well as the opportunity to challenge players from all around the globe by using Nintendo Wi-Fi connection. Get familiar with the gameplay mechanics during a new episode that serves as prologue to the original story, in addition to new maps, events and characters. Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon, only on Nintendo DS.